Hi guys, so this is one of the results from the 3DMark times by benchmark test. As you can see here, just to start off, it says that the graphics driver is not approved in the top right hand corner, and basically it's due to 3DMark just notifying us that the graphics driver that we use for this benchmark is not certified as yet. And that just simply means that because the RTX 4090 is such a new driver, it's not been tested and certified and such, and I'm pretty sure over time, once they test it, it's going to become certified, and you wouldn't get that notification you see in the top right hand corner. Here you have the score and how it relates to other premium gaming PCs and other high-end PCs. And as you can see, it's 97%. The result is 97% better than the other PCs, with that 3% of PCs most likely being top of the line desktop PCs. As you can see from the graph, also it's on the very higher end of. Here you can see a result of the times by score of 19,011 with a graphics score of 20,880 and a CPU score of 12,615. And these scores are accompanied by graphs. So here you can see CPU and GPU clock frequency graphs, and below here you can see a more detailed graph set of frame rate, temperature, percentage GPU load, and once again the same CPU and GPU clock frequency graphs. So starting with the frame rate, you could see for the graphics test we got a minimum frame rate of about 117 FPS with a peak frame rate of 188 FPS coming down to the end of the first graphics test. And for the second graphics test, you could see that we got a minimum of 85 FPS and a peak of about 146 FPS for the second graphics test. And for the CPU test, you could see you got a frame rate of 93, a peak frame rate of 93 at the start, and it went down to about 42 coming down to the end as the scene got more intense. Temperature wise, I know a lot of you guys are interested in what the thermals are like. During testing, the laptop did not get hot at all, even though the fan speeds were quite high and it was quite loud. I felt it was just probably a bit warm to the touch, but that was about it really. And we had a peak temperature of about 100 degrees right here throughout the tests for the CPU, and the GPU was a bit lower, peaking at about 72 degrees, yeah, during the first test. And during the graphics test, it was a bit lower for the CPU and a bit higher for the GPU as expected for both of the graphics tests, because that's where majority of the load is being placed on the GPU. And you could see here for the CPU test, obviously load is not being placed on the CPU, so you would expect to see this increase in temperature here up to a peak of about 97 or 98 degrees. And for the GPU, it kind of plateaued, because the load is not being placed on the CPU. So the thermals were dealt with quite well during testing. As you can see here, this is a measure of the GPU load, and as you can see, it jumped up after the start of the test to about 100% peak, and throughout the remainder of the first test it was a bit sporadic, I would say, a bit up and down, gradually trending down. And for the first and the second graphics tests, obviously a lot of load is being placed on the GPU, so you'd expect that the load would reach 100% as it's being stressed as much as it could possibly handle. And for the CPU tests, you'd expect the load to be very small, as a lot of the load is now being placed on the CPU as opposed to the GPU. And here we have the the clock frequency graphs for the CPU and the GPU. As you can see, it's quite high for the CPU, and once again, you know, it's just kind of sporadic, going up and down, generally trending down. Just, you know, bumped up a bit coming down to the end of the phase test, and the GPU frequency remained quite, I guess, stable, I would say, throughout testing as compared to the CPU. And I would say for the remainder of the test also it remained, you know, relatively stable. For the CPU, during the graphics test, you'd expect that, you know, it kind of, you know, dipped a bit lower compared to the initial part of the test, because once again, most of the load is being placed at this point on the GPU as opposed to the CPU. And once again, for the CPU test, a lot of the load is being placed on the CPU, so you'd expect to see higher clock speeds. And yeah, just plotted out to the end here. So that is basically it for the graphs, the metrics during testing. I intend to test benchmark test using Cinebench and also Geekbench. So if you guys are interested in that, you could look forward to these videos. I'll be releasing them soon. And that is pretty much it for this test. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe to see more.